Thank you for watching. Today we are analyzing the turbulence in the world and Ukraine's place in it. Our guest today is Denis Yelisevich, an active political blogger, world events analyst, and businessman. Denis, I welcome you.
Hello.
Ole Pritula, public activist. Ole, welcome to our channel.
Hello, Denis, Tatiana, and all our viewers. Thank you.
Today is an important topic. So we'll start with the events, of course, that are happening in Ukraine. We know that Russia has attacked Ukraine once again, and this is nothing new for us. But what's strange is that today is actually a historic day. Communications Department head Oleksandr Babak of the Armed Forces of Ukraine stated this. Why is it historic? Because it was on this very night that Ukraine struck Russia more times than Russia struck Ukraine. I would like to ask you, Denis, what do you think? What kind of trend is this? Has Ukraine gotten a second wind? Is this our desire to bring the war to the aggressor's territory, and what should we expect from this?
Zelensky is showing strength and trying to make it clear. Every strike on Ukraine will be answered with a strike on Russia. So it's not about accusing anyone, just stating a fact. This is a kind of escalation of the war.
Only, do you know about Zelensky requesting Tomahawks and being denied, and the reasons why? But on October 6th in the Oval Office, Trump said the following: I have in a way already made a decision. I think I want to find out what exactly they will do with these missiles, where they will direct them. I think that's a question they need to be asked. So in your opinion, does Trump actually understand where these Tomahawks will be headed? Why doesn't he specifically say that they won't be given if Ukraine can't use them? And why is this issue still on the agenda?
I believe that starting from January 20th, all those processes in terms of negotiations have been dragged out. Zelensky kept creating obstacles the whole time. And accordingly, Trump acts with two approaches at once. On one hand, he tries to economically strangle Putin through his policy with China and by putting pressure on the Arab countries. On the other hand, he understands that he needs to act a bit more aggressively in this regard. Maybe it won't be Tomahawks, maybe it will be some other missiles, but considering that Kennedy spoke literally a week ago and said that Russia's oil refineries still need to be damaged in order to make it, to put more pressure, to make it more negotiable, you could say, to push Putin towards negotiations. That's what's happening right now. Recently, of course, there have been a lot of strikes on those oil refineries, and it seems to me that this double pressure might actually help. Although I absolutely understand that, unfortunately, there will be feedback on Ukraine, and ordinary citizens will suffer. And whether this will lead to results faster, well, that's questionable. It's clear that pressure needs to be applied to Putin from all sides.
Thank you, Ole. Honestly, do you specifically believe in Tomahawks, considering Trump's speech yesterday?
You know, I listened to information from Frin, the military officer who said that Tomahawks don't solve the issue on the battlefield. And let's say for Ukraine, it would be better to provide aviation so that the issue could be resolved on the battlefield. That would be more effective. That's why I stick to his point of view.
But on the one hand, Tomahawks don't solve the issue. And on the other hand, we heard when Putin spoke at the Valdai conference, and there he said that if Tomahawks are used, then it would mean escalation against America. America will be drawn into the war. First, if you allow for such a thought, if America is drawn into the war, then how? The war will still occur on Ukrainian territory. If America provides these missiles, what changes will be visible?
Your question is related to... I just had a comment for Ole regarding his answer about the Tomahawks. For example, I consider this pure bluff from Trump. I listened to Trump very carefully yesterday. Both the translation and original seem to be in English. I didn't get a clear answer. I made the decision to give the Tomahawk. He's really good at doing that. He said, I made the decision. There's also a hint meant to scare Russia, like saying this is their final warning. I believe that Kennedy's statement, and everyone who's been saying this lately, is a complete bluff. In my opinion, as I see this situation, if Tomahawks are deployed in Ukraine, it will derail the negotiations. And how to put it, escalation, a new round of escalation. In a way, the United States is openly getting involved in the war. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not judging it. I just think Trump won't go for it. That's just my personal opinion, although I know many people have a completely different view. And about Atigrin, who is with the aviation, well, if you believe in that, then you have to believe that Ukraine can defeat Russia militarily. I don't believe in that. And that's also an escalation. But Tomahawks, that's, first of all, it's a serious missile, but as you said, it won't affect the battlefield. It's just a tool. As some people think or throw out some public coercion, well, let's be honest, it's Tomahawks. Let people study it. They might look up this missile on YouTube and see how it works. It can seriously destroy real Russian infrastructure. One question, and what will Putin just watch with a white flag at that moment? Unfortunately, he won't. So I think this situation is tough for Trump.
Well, I think, Dennis, that Trump has started to act a bit more aggressively here, at least. Now, right now, it's just words, only because he sees some kind of confidence. Pay attention. Lately, he hasn't been using phrases like World War III, nuclear weapons, and so on. So that means he's not afraid of this red line and still confident that he can put pressure on Putin. I don't rule out that now, considering the situation with China. There are supposed to be some meetings on October 20th, those communist ones. So maybe even the political situation inside China will change. I think that maybe Trump, knowing that situation, that China might waver, is acting from this angle. Maybe it's just a psychological attack from his side. But to me, it still feels like he is more confident in his actions now, because he understands those conversations with the KGB agent Putin lead to nothing. Plus, there's also socialist Europe, which is slow moving and isn't going to act quickly. That's how I see the situation.
I'm sorry.
Tatiana, does it seem like Europe has pulled away entirely? After all this time, has Europe really not responded? Tatiana, do you have any general questions about Europe or anything about Europe on your list?
There is a question regarding what was published on October 6th in the Wrocław newspaper. This is a city located in Poland, and there the European Commissioner for Defense and Space, Kubilusa, yes, he writes the following according to his information, and he trusts this information because it is provided by German intelligence, and he says that the Kremlin is allegedly preparing an attack on NATO.
And he claims that if they are discussing such a situation, it means that we must be prepared.
You should trust the information since, as he says, German intelligence is discussing it. Putin immediately responded to this statement on the same day and says that it's nonsense. In turn, Peskov accused the West of paranoia. So let's figure out this situation. Is there really any threat to NATO countries? Well, not just anything, but specifically from Russia? And is there any danger for them? Why is the European Commissioner making this statement? Dennis, what do you think?
They're sounding the alarm because, how should I put it, they're not prepared for anything and they're drawing attention to themselves. There have been so many of these statements. I don't believe there will be a war in Europe. But aside from making intimidating statements, they can't do anything else right now. Putin knows this well. I don't believe there will be war in Europe, but it's unpleasant to watch. Well, okay, Poland is in a relatively dangerous zone, but when there are alarms somewhere, as I already said on air, when alarms go off in Vienna, already in a neutral country, for a moment, consider Switzerland, where much of the world's money is stored. It's a unique place, like Geneva or Zurich. So, of course, this is a terrible situation. But look, Putin said, I don't believe in this, and it's not just because Putin said so. I recall Putin saying this about 15 years ago when asked. And about the Crimea, even before he annexed Crimea, Putin said, what are you talking about? If we go into Crimea, it's like opening Pandora's box. Russia has about 100 to 200 disputed territories. Before the Ukraine war, he and Lavrov insisted there would be no conflict, but that's irrelevant. Putin lacks strength. By the way, this is a question about Tomahawks. The United States from the sea, I think, can launch 7,000 or 8,000 Tomahawks at once. that would erase Russia entirely. The only issue is nuclear weapons.
Ole, what do you think about the NATO countries, about the European Union? How united are they in their decisions? And if they were attacked, would the NATO countries be able to defend themselves?
You have to keep in mind that there are two forces here. Now, on one side is the European Union, but there's also England, Britain, which has its own opinions on any events. That's why I'm sure that Putin is provoking Europe, understanding that it's toothless, and England is also pushing Putin from behind because it's interested in some kind of unrest, especially since this is a confrontation between England itself and the European Union. As part of this social structure, it's always tense, and England is taking advantage of the situation, and I think only making the problem worse. So here, as if the only one on the right side of history is Trump. And both England and the European Union are just spinning around all the time. What will Trump say? And Putin acts the way he does. He is interested to stir up Europe and maybe raise that issue. And you understand, this is also beneficial for Zelensky, that is to drag Putin into this as well, in that direction. That is, this immediately adds stars to Zelensky's shoulders. He's praised as a hero who stood his ground and defended Europe, but then everything suddenly collapsed.
Ole, you also mentioned that China is being pressured by America. America is pressuring China, and that's obvious. Could you please clarify how China feels about this? Is this weakening China right now, or is it a different kind of weakening? For example, we see that Ukrainian forces are shelling oil depots in Russia, so what? And we see that Russia, for example, will not sell automotive fuel abroad until December 1st. They will deal with the situation later. And so it seems like there is some weakening, but it's not that significant. Compare this weakening to the pressure from Europe, to the pressure from Trump on China.
Of course, there is pressure. And the fact that Trump made it clear and reminded everyone once again who is the boss in this world, meaning the boss is the market where you can sell goods and where they just produce some minor products, that's not necessarily the case. Or they produce, say, a gas pump. So without America, they're basically nobody, and they definitely feel and know that. That's why Trump is exploiting this situation. I think he came up with this tariff scheme towards other countries perfectly, which can control the process, and in this way demand from them the conditions that he sets. And that's why I'm sure that China is already starting to waver, and most likely, maybe in the near future, we'll already see some results of this pressure.
Before we move on to tariffs, I wanted to ask, Dennis, do you have anything to add on this topic regarding China and Russia and Trump's pressure on these two countries? Do you have anything to say?
I have something to add to everything. Ole is definitely an optimist. I wish I were too. And it's true, there are elites in China, wealthy elites, who want to go back to the way Deng Xiaoping did things, or something like that, meaning having normal relations with the West, and they want to get rid of the communists. But I have to admit that this Jinping has built an incredibly powerful system, this communist one. There's extreme power concentration there. All are billionaires. Security is strong and well paid. Intelligence agencies and censorship are present. Everything is tightly controlled. But somehow I don't believe in the fall of China at all. For example, I expect more from elsewhere. Currently, France's political situation is unstable. Emmanuel Macron. In Britain, everyone hates Starmer. They even say this is a historic anti-record. That is, the prime minister, the one who runs the country, actually has the lowest public support in history. Actually, in democratic countries, this usually doesn't last long, despite all of Britain's problems. For example, Oleg and I are talking about recent events there. We have to admit the current prime minister, yes, he's already, what's his name, Starmer, the fifth one since the war began, I think. Yes, I think he's the fifth. In Ukraine, Zelensky remains head of state, as before. I'm saying early elections will still happen there. And for some reason, I think they might even manage to do it this year. If not, then in the first quarter of next year. Europe is becoming more right-wing. And then Spain. There are elections in Spain in December. A Europe united with Trump could also gradually destabilize China, but there's still time. Trump will serve until 2029. If Republicans win in 2028, the outlook improves further. But dictatorship, right now, Trump is very dissatisfied with Maduro. You have to start somewhere. No, Maduro will be the first to go, then Zelensky, and then Lukashenko, Putin, and that's it. The domino effect.
Here I can definitely agree, because now is simply the time. There's going to be such a peak at one moment that all those social structures will fall like dominoes. Right now, you could say this is just a prelude, and Trump began this process. He turned his big ship around 180 degrees, and everyone who gets in the way will definitely be thrown out, because they won't be able to handle freedom of speech, transparency in relationships, or the reduction of bureaucracy. That's what Trump is doing here. The processes will definitely move in a better direction. Well, and every victory for Trump, I believe, is a victory for Ukraine, meaning every victory inside the country, because he sets an example of what needs to be done here with bureaucracy and leftists, as well as with foreign policy. And that's why I hope that in the end it will lead to the right kind of alliance between Ukraine and America, which will support the conservative wing. Accordingly, we will need to choose a leader in Ukraine who will work in unison with the conservative wing of America. This would be the next stage. Well, at the moment, of course, to stop this slaughter, which Trump is trying his best to do.
Ole, I would like to switch to the topic of France, but you brought up the issue, the topic of the leader.
We can't leave this topic alone, because wherever you go on social media, everyone is talking about the upcoming elections and what will happen next. Yesterday, Dennis and I discussed that Arestovich was interviewed by Ksenia Sobchak. And there he said that 4 regions and Crimea should be given to Russia. Yes, and he will go to church to pray together with Putin for those who died in this war. And today there is already information that the Russian services have put him on the wanted list because they believe what he said was inappropriate, to give up 4 regions and Crimea without official confirmation. They didn't like that. The Ukrainian authorities condemned him on their part, saying he's a traitor, and he also betrayed Ukraine on his part. And so, well, if we take his example, let's say a person expresses their opinion, how can she be a leader, become the leader of the country when there is such pressure from both sides?
He clearly represents a pro-Kiev group. And it seems to me that they made a deal with the KGB that he would play the role of a clown, because there hasn't been a clown in Russia for a long time. There was Zhirinovsky, I think, and now Arestovich is starting to take that position. I don't see it any other way. So, in terms of any political prospects in the future, well, that's really hard to imagine. And what's this? He's doing what he always does, changing his stance 25 times, and now he'll do it again. Basically, he does whatever he likes, public relations and clowning around.
Dennis, and could you clarify, please, in your opinion, is this a betrayal, or how would you properly call it? What word would you use?
If he says that 4 regions and Crimea should be given away, but officially no documents should be signed, then what is that? Is that the right decision? Is it a betrayal?
Honestly, I need to double check the information that Russia put him on the wanted list because of his statements. They're interested regardless of whether he has documents. We need to clarify why. But yesterday I managed a couple of hours, honestly. Before going to bed, I managed a couple of hours. And look, I watched Sobchak maybe about 20 episodes before that. During her time working, I observed how guests are introduced and how things are managed. Nearly every time Arestovich responded, they zoomed the camera in on his face. Do you understand? She was asking him trolling questions. She was sitting there trolling him. Then the editing was trolling him too. For every answer he gave, they treated it as pure lies. They would insert clips of him contradicting himself, and his past words looked comical. He obviously has a high opinion of himself. Legs crossed. This thing like Nevzorov's a scepter or whatever you call it, together with Anton at the same time. And they're really making a clown out of him. He thinks he's speaking seriously, but they're making fun of him, meaning they don't take him seriously. The disgusting part was something else. That Oleg and I talked about it when he visited America and was on Patrick Bet-David's show. Oleg and I came to a conclusion when we first called each other. He was selling himself to Putin for 2 hours, and then he did that 4-hour interview, spending 4 hours selling himself to Putin. Before that, he was marketing himself to Trump and his team. I know for sure that he was rejected here, even at the earliest stages, wherever he tried to get in. This is accurate information. And his fate is sad. He says some things correctly. He says, I'm not a politician. I would also say I'm not a politician, but he behaves like a politician. Overall, he made every possible mistake, regardless of the role he imagined for himself. Well, it's phenomenal. How can a person who has read 2,000 books just keep making mistake after mistake? Neither Russia nor Ukraine will take this seriously now, no matter how much he wants.
I confirm the words that Sobchak tricked him, and she was playing along with him the whole time. Yes, absolutely.
He's also from KGB technology.
Absolutely. That is, they, understanding, I think, used artificial intelligence, how it reacts to certain questions. And they just set him up where he would get caught, 100%.
This information that he is wanted has existed for a long time, but today it was updated. Russian media have reported on this since October 7th. Ole, let's clarify regarding the territories, because this is a very sensitive issue for Ukraine. Do you think that a peace agreement will be signed between Ukraine and Russia? So do we have to give up territories? Will we have to exchange them? Will we be able to keep all our territories without any concessions? How do you see the situation?
Well, if you put territory on one side and human life on the other, it's clear. The answer is clear, but I'm here too. Artighrin suggested that most likely, as he sees it, the agreement was something like giving up Donetsk and Luhansk regions, but at the same time taking some part of Zaporizhzhia, and this one below, that is. He explained that strategically this so-called sausage at the bottom was created by Putin. It can be cut off at any time. That is, it's a vulnerable territory from the point of view of an attack. That's why I think that in order to stop the slaughter, to stop the destruction of our armed forces right now, it's clear that we need to agree to some of these compromises. But it's clear that for Zelensky, this would be the end of his political career. So there will be maximum resistance, I'm sure, right up to the very end. Although it's possible that the agreements have already been prepared and Zelensky has agreed to everything, they're just looking for some way to present this information so that from a political point of view, it doesn't look too bad for them. That's my point of view.
And if they tell the truth, then what? People won't be able to handle it. It will be a tragedy for us. We won't survive it. Why don't they just say it like it is, in your opinion?
Because their political dividends go down. I mean, now it's 3% and then it'll be -3. You need to understand the situation. There will definitely be a lot of resistance.
Because from what you said, I would have thought they care about people and don't want to disappoint them.
Well, they do care about people. Just logically speaking, if the war continues and lasts for some more time, it's possible that Putin will bring in more Cubans or Iranians or people from North Korea. We'll lose more territory, but we will lose it. How many people are in the AFU? So this golden foundation, that the foundation of Ukraine, which in the future was supposed to build this Ukraine. So what's the point of doing this? I mean, it definitely needs to be done. Here I urge people to support Trump and definitely write to him on the Truth platform, on the X platform, that we support your actions, we support peace, we want to stop the fighting, we want to stop the war, and together with you build the economy. I think that's the right message to Trump.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Did you want to add something else?
No, go ahead, say it, yes.
Sorry, there may be a delay and I hear it a bit late. I wanted to add, it seems to me that the standard approach here, this is just an important topic in general territories. The standard approach doesn't work here. And right away you imagine, what would you do in this situation? Well, obviously no one would end up in such a situation. It just wouldn't happen otherwise. But let's say going out to Putin and putting him in a corner in front of Trump with some proposals that the KGB isn't expecting. For example, people will say, fine, you criticize and suggest. So here's a proposal, not directly for him, but in general. The Donetsk and Luhansk administrative regions are basically united as Donbas, but Donbas becomes part of Ukraine with the status of autonomy, or as a federation as a whole. Why isn't that an option? Let Donbas residents choose Yanukovych if they want, but as an autonomous region or federation within Ukraine. If the KGB had publicly voiced this solution to Trump, it was definitely discussed privately within his team, I'm telling you. For some reason, I'm not sure why, it's not mentioned that way, probably to avoid hurting Zelensky. So why isn't this a proposal? Why not come out with this suggestion? Russian shouldn't just have special status, but become a second official language. Is that what Putin wants from us? He doesn't. We support freedom of religion. This isn't about just doing what Putin wants. We stand for religious freedom. But if you try to send KGB agents disguised as priests to us, they'll end up in prison. We support freedom of languages. Any other interference will be punished by security services and the law. No one disagrees. It was a one-sided game. We need to play in an unconventional way. Now, to answer the question, what if Zelensky suggests this? Like Oleg said, the rating will be -3 since only someone not holding on to power would do that. And someone who goes there to make historic changes for Ukraine while Zelensky does everything for his rating. Now, you have to understand, Tatiana, and the viewers as well. Every action Zelensky and Yermak take is first discussed within their inner circle in terms of ratings, not whether it's good or bad for Ukraine. First, it's about the ratings. If those are fine, then they consider what it means for Ukraine and its people.
But personally, I can't see the connection between what's happening now and having high ratings. What's happening right now? So, mobilization, which people are against, low standard of living, closed borders. The fact that not everyone can express themselves as much as they want, does that really give this position a high rating? Now, in your opinion, Dennis?
No rating is given now, so the situation continues. You have to understand the population that was sold the so-called scoundrel Petrov, a propagandist as a patriot who is sitting in court for Ukraine and doing something there. You can sell anything to such a society, just like in Russia, where the society that supports the Putin regime can also be sold absolutely anything. If they believe that Ukraine is a country that needs to be bombed because we are somehow different and that the issue can't be resolved any other way, then you can sell them anything too. What did Ole say about this? That's the main point now. Zelensky is saying, let us join the European Union and treat us as if we're in NATO, unofficially, so the 5th article applies. I'll tell people we're in NATO, but due to military actions and disputed territories, we can't join now. But we'll say we're already there de facto. De jure no, but de facto we're there. And secondly, look, I brought Ukraine into the European Union. What more do you want from a great president? Tomorrow, Areslovich might return to the president's office with Podolyak, appear on air with Feigen and say, we were wrong, Zelensky is simply the greatest man. Yes, there was a decline, but he's a historic president. He unofficially brought us into NATO, and the European Union started and ended the war, and people will say he ended it. Propaganda is terrible. Then all these Stanenkos, Lachenis, and Petrovs will spread it. They have a network of tens of millions of subscribers. They have enormous budgets. Arestovich was on Sobchak's show, so why didn't he speak? I saw on a fence that Areslovich was getting $10,000 a month in cash. We should probably start there. It's not honest right away. Deputies get money in envelopes for voting. It's not honest right away. Let's imagine in America this Levitt girl, the blonde one, who was a press attaché, getting $10,000 or even $20,000 from Trump in an envelope. Can you imagine that? Impossible. And senators voting for envelopes? Even the Democrats, impossible. Over there, everything is handled more seriously. Let's start. There's nothing left to discuss.
Let's remember, sorry for interrupting you, but I'd like to bring up the question I discussed with both of you, though at different times, regarding those pranksters who called Samantha and found out exactly what American officials were giving to our government so that she would supposedly continue the war, so that she would get involved in the war and keep it going. Ole, you said that this amount didn't impress you. It was $1.5 billion per month, the cash that the globalists gave to Ukraine. And people were fighting. Well, I wouldn't say that people were fighting for this cash. People were fighting because there was a war. Money from this cash was used for salaries and social benefits, but since it was cash, it wasn't controlled. It's unclear how much was spent by whom or on what. And this situation, Dennis, as if America couldn't give, but it was giving to Ukraine?
I mean, on the domestic market. Externally, they can do whatever they want. The CIA funded all Latin American rebels. That's how it works with money. We're discussing domestic American life. Yeah. What America or any country does abroad is intelligence or geopolitics, which is entirely different. We're focused on the internal civilized democracy or just some kind of marketplace. Like in Ukraine, it's a marketplace.
So that amount wasn't impressive to me, although those numbers are generally impressive. I was talking about something else, that this is not an isolated case and that this has been happening for many, many years. And starting 30 years ago, as soon as Soros created those non-governmental organizations here, that's when all this rot began. And accordingly, since the Democrats, practically all the last 30 years after Reagan, it was Democrats all the time. During Bush's time in power, I don't even count him because you can't call him a Democrat at all. That's why the socialists held power all these decades. Accordingly, they corrupted Ukraine as well. And you could say that since it had been corrupt there for a long time, Ukraine was completely under their heel and just as corrupt. Number one is America in the last few decades. Number two is Ukraine. And now all those ongoing studies and investigations at the moment, all those threads will lead to Ukraine. There is an absolute connection here, and it will reveal those kickbacks, starting from the times of Obama and the term, and Biden as well. All information will be revealed. So I think that the time will come when they will also need to create this Department of Justice, Department of Efficiency, which should investigate the whole situation from the inside here. Who and how many schemes, it will all come to that. So this is another form of resistance from the current authorities, because they understand that it will happen. When the fighting stops, it will happen. That's why they are very worried about that situation.
Today on your stream, you talked about how the Democrats are making unconscious decisions, if we can call them that, unconscious, uninformed, not quite right. Please explain what is happening in France. Why did the Prime Minister only last 27 days in office? What did he do to displease the Parliament? What are the disagreements? And if there are new parliamentary elections now and the opposition comes to power, how will Macron cooperate with them then? Do you know about this, Dennis?
Very superficially, because I'm waiting for some more active steps before I get deeply involved. I see that there's a political crisis there, let's call it that, a political crisis, and Macron can't handle the situation. As I understand it, they appointed a new prime minister there, and the new prime minister didn't even last a month. This is a pure political crisis. Everything has collapsed. A political crisis.
Absolutely. Now take Canada, France, England, or Australia. It's the same situation everywhere. Everything there is under the control of the globalists. And Macron himself is just a pawn that they move back and forth. The only real player today is Trump, and all the others, he treats them as if they are nobody. Because he understands that they don't represent the country of France. They represent the bureaucracy of the socialists, Soros, and all that globalist rabble that's already going down. Here, Trump just needs to make a few more efforts, and all of this will fall, just like we said, like dominoes. And maybe France will be the first one at this moment, because if you look at the party breakdown in all the European countries, you'll see that there are about 25% of some right-wing forces, and then you have the Democrats, socialists, semi-socialists, communists, Greens, so that's 75%. This is a usurpation of power by the leftists, and they won't give up that power and will never give it up voluntarily. Right-wing forces currently have 25%, but I believe 75% of people have common sense, though the power is taken from them. And that shuffle and scheme with these parties, they switch them around like shell games, but they stay in power anyway. At the same time, they add this green agenda. It's just another climate change scheme to steal money for the next elections. That's what's happening in Europe. That's why it's in such a shaky state. And that's why, Dennis, as we talked before, moving towards Europe and Ukraine is complete nonsense. It's a cesspool. And even if you take the information from a year ago, there wasn't as much information about these problems in Europe as there is now. They somehow keep it quiet. Yes, as if everything was fine there, but now it turns out that Europe is a complete mess. That's it. And where to if Zelensky or the Ukrainian authorities are trying to turn in that direction? Now you should turn that way and run as far as you can. But we've drawn the vector. The United States should be our ally, and we should forget about Europe, at least until decommunization and de-Islamization are happening there. Here, Ukraine is actually in a winning position. It's exactly about uniting with Europe, taking Israel as an ally, and just think, where are the strongest armed forces now? America, Israel, Ukraine. And this union, this triangle, I believe, would be the future guarantor of the Western world, which should focus on de-Islamization, decommunization of society, and helping other countries as well. And Ukraine could become such an island of freedom in this region.
Tatiana, may I? Olesh just mentioned the globalists. Who, I'll take a step back to the previous topic where it concerned Ukraine, all these United States Agency for International Development, and so on. This began in the early 90s when Ole mentioned Soros arriving in 1990 or 1991, starting the gradual Vidrogenia, but during Kravchuk's time, it wasn't active yet. Then Kuchma kept the situation balanced. I mean, Kuchma was called pro-Russian there. He worked with Pinchuk, sold pipes, made billions, and kept Russia out. Medvedchuk once pressured him to appoint him as head of the presidential administration. Actually, he was balancing things out. There was nothing like that. Then Yanukovych came. Of course, there was some kind of deal with Yushchenko. Apparently, Yanukovych allowed this United States Agency for International Development to go deeper. Naim Leshchenko back then, they and their followers showed up, and it just kept going. United States Agency for International Development ultimately removed Yanukovych, though he tried to balance things. Still, he quickly let in Russian agents. When Poroshenko came after Maidan, the country came completely under the control of United States Agency for International Development and Soros. Zelensky didn't move in this direction. He was re-recruited. I know on what. Maybe we'll get to that later. Next, I'm reading the news. Lithuania or Latvia, somewhere around there. Tikhanovskaya lives there, so they're reducing state budget expenses for Tikhanovskaya's security. That's the Belarusian position. Do you know how much? They paid €1 million a year from the state budget for Tikhanovskaya's security. Did you know that? America would just offer $1 million or $2 to protect Elisevich from Zelensky. It's absurd. These countries are under United States Agency for International Development Control, and that's their agenda. Let's eliminate Russian language and culture here and categorize everyone. That's good. That's right. Here's how it works. People have left poor countries. Tikhanovskaya pays for security. I sat down right away and thought, 80 grand a month. That's like 30 guys with automatic rifles who served in the Israeli army or whoever is protecting her. And I mean, it's just some kind of nightmare, absurd. That's how deep all these claws have gotten in. And of course, it's right. Oleg says, Europe must recover. What kind of European Union do we need? We're at the crossroads, a trade bridge. Ukraine is still a huge country with a large population, trade with everyone, a neutral country, and an ally everyone knows, an ally of America. That's right. Israel and Argentina in South America are all distinct civilizations. This is mutually beneficial. Common sense and profit unite people. In Europe, everything is decided in Brussels, including who is president in Ukraine. Just look at Brussels. All this led to a catastrophe in Europe. These people like Ursula von der Leyen and others like her.
And that's why politics in Ukraine looks the way it does. Putin is a KGB agent, an invader, and so on. And Europe is supposed to be our ally. But Europe is also to blame in this war because it was definitely a conspiracy between the globalists and the KGB agents. And that's why there's only one way out for Ukraine. It's really the conservative wing of America that we need to move towards and seek support from, which at the moment, as a political force, is not present in Ukraine at all. There are two forces in Ukraine. Some remnants of pro-Russian forces remain. And basically 99% is taken up by Soros's people. There's nothing else there. And the fact that they pretend to be fighting among themselves is pure imitation, because they're all the same, absolutely no different from each other. Let me take charge and I'll handle things my way. That's it. No one is talking about changing the system, changing the direction of the course, or any changes at all toward freedom of speech, a free market, or non-interference of the state in business. No one is even looking in that direction. That's why people need to understand, wake up, and support this. Why support the position of Trump and people with common sense? Because that's the only way out for Ukraine. Otherwise, it will get stuck again in that rotten Europe and will never get out of this situation.
You say that 90% in Ukraine are Soros supporters. And I'm curious, how can others come to power in Ukraine? Those with differing opinions are either forced to leave the country, as they mention in public posts, or face sanctions. They don't have any opportunities at the moment. Regarding what was said about Europe, that they are to blame for this war, yesterday Merkel said in an interview that COVID was to blame, as she would have met with Putin if not for it. Yes, we understood from the context that she would have acted herself and influenced an agreement. You weren't at that interview, we discussed it with Dennis. But today I see information that the European Union wants to impose 50% tariffs on steel imports because they think their economy is struggling. They need to import less steel and develop their own factories and production. What do you think, Ole? Is this justified? Is it necessary to do this? How will it affect Ukraine? If this happens, America and especially Britain will suffer the most.
Tatiana, the surname Merkel makes me feel nauseous because this is a person who should be on trial together with Putin in the future and together with the socialists of Europe because she ruined Germany. The woman who, by the way, doesn't have any children, and I have the impression that she's some kind of Satanist to ruin Germany like that. That is together with the KGB agents. And especially the previous one, what was his name? The Chancellor, where did he go? Where does he work? At Gazprom? So it's absolutely obvious. It's as clear as day, as they say. That's what I wanted to say regarding Merkel. I think the tribunal should add her to that list, along with Obama, Clinton, Putin, and the entire communist structure. And you asked the question.
The question was about the fact that the countries of the European Union want to strengthen their economy, and against this background, they are imposing sanctions. They are imposing 50% tariffs, not sanctions, on steel imports into their countries. And accordingly, how will this affect them? Will it affect Britain the same way it affects Asian countries? What results do you think the world will expect from this? And will they strengthen their economy this way? Europeans for themselves?
I want to stress again that their economy has declined. I'm sure they were influenced by China over the European Union to break it completely, to bring it to such a situation, also to Islamize it. In short, nothing alive remains in that Europe. I don't even know what prospects there are. I see prospects for America, Ukraine, Argentina, El Salvador, and Poland, let's say, and Israel. But I don't see any prospects for the European Union. I don't even know how to comment on that because they completely lost the economic war with China. I mean, China just wiped them out. At the moment, with those electric cars, which are practically free now, and just so you understand, China is subsidizing this industry. That is, the Chinese party allocates money for this and then sends them to Europe for sale. So that's their policy, and accordingly, as they say, it's already too late here. What are they going to do? The only way.
I don't know what to do. They got together and repeated after Trump. Let's put tariffs on steel for him. That's the simple solution. When I read it, I didn't understand at all what that was about.
They said that they're referring to the fact that Trump provoked it. They said that Trump provoked such a decision because he previously imposed a 25% tariff, and now Europe has decided to impose 50%.
That's called shooting yourself in the foot or cutting off your nose to spite your face. There are other similar expressions too.
Industry under the European value added tax of 25 to 28%. It's impossible to attract investments. Take the ranking of the top 50 companies in the world or the top 25. There won't be a single European company there. There will be Asian companies, mostly American ones, but not a single European company. What does that make you think about? Well, the business climate has been crushed by taxes. They just don't let anyone work. You have to
take another step. They tax 50 to 60% there. I think it should be 90. Everything will work out. That's all.
Give it to Ursula. And then she
will decide. She will share it with China. Thank you.
Let's discuss another situation that's happening in Gaza. And this conflict with Israel, what do you think will be done there in the near future? Because Trump proposed 20 points and Hamas did not agree with all of them. The points that are the most irritating, you could say, Marco Rubio stated the following today, that October 7th is the second anniversary of the massive attack organized by the terrorist group Hamas. And the question for you, Ole, what do you think? Will the 20 points proposed by Trump be agreed upon with Hamas? Will this war end?
Or is this not all yet?
First of all, I would like to, in connection with this tragedy, to express my condolences to everyone who lost loved ones who are still there in those Hamas prisons. This is the first point. And the second is my opinion. They probably won't return the hostages now. And I'm not sure that they're alive. That's just my honest opinion that anyway, Netanyahu will have to clear this out, the Plasticine territory with those Plasticine people, and eventually build a Riviera there, just like Trump planned. And maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to use part of it as a base for the United States of America to control the whole region from Islam and this Islamofascism. So I think that everything is moving in that direction. As Trump said, there will likely be a Riviera there.
Dennis, the question will be for you regarding how to reach a compromise in terms of disarmament, because in those points it says that Gaza needs to be disarmed and demilitarized. Hamas does not agree to this. What is your opinion on this?
For a long time now, even before I entered the public space, I have been very firm in one opinion. Sooner or later, all this filth needs to be physically wiped out completely. This concerns the regime of the old Islamic revolution in Iran, and these guys too. I like President Trump's plan. But I remember the morning of October 7th. I came to America back then with all my problems. I checked my phone, see what's happening in Israel, the atrocities and attacks, and I clearly understand the situation. Something like that. It will definitely happen again if they are given another chance. I have nothing against others. We know these are terrorists in the Gaza Strip, but I don't remember. I think 30-40% are youths up to 16 or 18 years old. There are no jobs there, and these terrorists recruit them very quickly for their vile deeds. All decent people work in Israel, and the access to the sea there is just fantastic, fantastic. Civilization should reach there, and people should live civilly. In Israel, language and nationality issues, including Arabic, are not politicized as they are in Ukraine. There, all of this coexists peacefully together. But only decent people who are ready to live in Western civilization, let's say, in a normal society with normal values. For a modern person, anyone wanting to run around with a gun and act aggressively should be driven out everywhere. I remember back then too. You arrive at Miami Beach near the shore where they displayed photos of the victims kidnapped at the start. There were a lot of people. The next day I come there, some jerk tore them down. I see it's basically an act of vandalism, like a protest. These are the kind of people you need to find in America, everywhere. Deport them there. If you defend it so much, then go there and live. Those protests across Europe, they're terrible. I watched it all in horror. Just a fantastic number of these protests, crowds of people. In the Netherlands super cities, there was a huge rally in Vienna and also one in Geneva or somewhere else in Switzerland. It's a nightmare. I'm telling you, one fine day, these scoundrels will signal that crowd in Europe to act and they'll obey. Then we're all finished. It won't just be Russia versus Ukraine anymore. Everyone will have to unite against them, though not everyone realizes this yet. That's why this must be stopped now. It's already grown out of control.
I absolutely support Dennis. I believe that people should live separately and animals should live separately. I mean, even calling them animals, it's not right to call them that if from age 3 he is constantly... They convinced him he must kill a Jew. That's already pathological. That's why I think that their territory needs to be cleared, relocate them to Egypt, especially since Israel is ready to pay some money for their relocation. And in this way, if just once and for all, that problem could be solved, then consider what's happening now in Gaza. All this awaits Europe. In the future, Europe will be dealing with the same thing. Only Israel has the strength to do it, while Europeans are too tolerant. I think they will hardly be able to handle it. That's why what's happening now, that funding Gaza, Hamas, and so on, these are all leftist, globalist structures, including that bureaucratic United Nations system which is 100% leftist and needs to be shut down. Absolutely. And it only feeds all of this completely. That's why I think this is definitely where things are heading in the near future. I think Israel will handle this situation. And in the future, like I said, Dennis and my position, Christians should unite with Jews in order to resist in this Islamofascism, because this is now the number one problem in Europe. Israel, as I said, will handle this situation, but Europe will have problems.
On October 7th, 2023, they brutally killed people. They killed infants. Today, leaders like Spain's Prime Minister Sanchez come forward as examples. He's a globalist and their puppet. Now, they're talking about removing Israel from Eurovision and UEFA. So, Israel can't play on the national team in European competitions or at club level. This will likely affect other teams too. Well, let's just say that the globalists funded the Gaza Strip and Palestine. America, the globalists gave them huge amounts of money. Where did it all go if nothing was built? Obviously, those wanting to conquer took everything for themselves.
They were building tunnels instead of, the leftists, this whole structure. They're incapable of building anything. They can organize something to destroy. That's what they do. But to build and live peacefully, that's not in their rules. That's why we need to solve this issue strictly here. I think that all those countries that voted for Palestine and Ukraine got involved in that too. Unfortunately, all of them should be on the blacklist. In principle, in relation to any common sense towards some normal situation. So you could say that everyone who they voted against Trump and against America. And now Trump is sitting. Yes, Ukraine votes against Israel, and Israel's an ally. Well, what should he do? I mean, how can Trump build the economy with Zelensky in the future? Why is this happening again? It's the 25th time, not the first. Thank you.
I would like to ask you for the 25th time, and also ask other leaders, how can they express their opinions and come to power if they are under sanctions? Do you think they have the opportunity to reach out to people to make their position known, to say that we will build this kind of country? Do you think this opportunity exists in Ukraine? If not, how can it be made possible?
Yes, of course. We all need to unite with others who have common sense, and not just in one country, but in many countries, because all countries have the same problem, and we need to help each other. And we need to expand our space. As Javier Milei said, the more of us there are, the fewer of them there are. So it depends on our activity, on the activity of the people who are listening to us, how quickly we can change something. And of course, plus the necessary support for Trump's policies, because only he can solve that problem. And in the end, I'm sure that when the conservative wing gets involved in the process closer to the elections, then I think Trump can make it happen. First of all, we need to deal with that marathon, and secondly, put it into action. Truth Platform and X Platform. This lets people quickly access some truthful information. I think that's the only way. That is, our activity should win in the end.
Let's finish the thought about Israel, because for the words you said, you were given money by the globalists. Where it went, it's not clear. And there is information that America during the war provided Israel with more than $21 billion in military aid. And it is specifically Palestine and the Democrats who accuse America of allegedly helping to fuel this conflict and financially supporting it. What are your thoughts, Dennis?
Yes, there's nothing to discuss here. America has always supported Israel and will continue to do so. As a stronghold of Western civilization in the region, Israel is a key ally of the United States in the Middle East. And 21 billion is quite a normal story. It's not much, really. Samantha Power says, we give Zelensky $1.5 billion in cash every month, while Trump gave Ukraine $300 billion. Go through Zelensky and Yermak. Focus there. This is just a distraction. Theft isn't an issue in Israel. It's not even considered. There are no volunteers taking things for themselves. People genuinely help with food and soldiers, but you won't see a volunteer suddenly ending up with two $100,000 cars. That just doesn't happen. That doesn't exist in Israel. It's impossible here, so there's nothing to discuss.
Ole, and one more question to wrap up this topic. Will America, the money that America gave, as Dennis just mentioned, will America somehow get that money back from you? Or is it already impossible? Are these funds lost for America forever?
You mean in Ukraine?
For America to get it back? Because when the war started, they say that cash was given to Zelensky. Russian mass media talk about this, and pranksters have highlighted this information. They gave 300 billion, right? Dennis?
No, well, regarding Ukraine, Trump proposed an absolutely reasonable direction. This is to do it like this. He already is now. What? An economic agreement, the Ukrainian American fund, which will be replenished through the extraction of mineral resources. Maybe, I'm sure, if only the war stops, and there's a lot of business because America is working there, accordingly, investments will follow. And moreover, the source of this fund can be replenished with money that was stolen. Ukrainian authorities at this time, many sources will join this process eventually. Here, America will also profit from a business perspective, and accordingly, it will be a plus for Ukraine in the future. Well, that's how business is done. I come with investments, and we do business together, and both sides make a profit. But there is one problem for our bureaucracy. It will be impossible to steal there. That's the problem.
Some people didn't even know about the investments. When they gave out cash, people didn't know about it. We weren't informed. We only found out later. After all of this happened?
Yeah, well, now we know. And we'll have to return that money, right? So what? And in the future, Ukraine will face, well, Denis's position is to cut 70% of bureaucrats. I'm more of a libertarian than Denis. I say 90. There's nothing left to keep there. There's nothing.
What? I always say 70 is just the first stage. That's already a lot, and then we'll figure it out further. Because
you could say politics and technology and the development of humanity in general, politics is 100 years behind, including the building of parties, the struggle of those parties, the creation of these parliaments. So only is just mimicking a process and laundering money through those structures. A lot of things will need to be reconsidered in Ukraine, including the socialist constitution. So the system will need to be changed here. And as an example, we already have some experience with Javier Milei. Here in America, things are happening. There are always good moments. All of this will need to be used in Ukraine as well. The main thing is to be an ally of America, not Europe. There's nothing to learn in Europe, nothing to learn except how to take 50% of your income and taxes to skin you alive. So you absolutely shouldn't even look in that direction.
Thank you for this meaningful conversation. Anything else to add?
I have something to add. You brought up how a new leader could come to power in Ukraine. I'm reading a post today from the anonymous Telegram channel Kartochny Office. Everyone knows who writes it, under whose control it is, and why he writes it. The Ukrainian authorities in contact with Elon Musk. So the goal is for Musk to eventually reveal the IP and home addresses of anonymous account writers. Pro-Russian means opposing Zelensky, to put it simply. Clearly, Elon Musk would never support that. I'm doing all this in Musk's English, tagging him on X. And people come into the comments, many from anonymous accounts, writing some nonsense instead of being serious. We know this won't happen, but I brought it up. Go ahead and tag Musk under my post about this. Take steps to protect yourself so you can speak anonymously and avoid anyone coming to your home. You said only people because you hope that some kind uncle will help. I've made a lot of sacrifices in my life. I don't expect anything in return, but people should somehow support people like that. If they can't or won't help themselves, at least do something. Just sitting and watching isn't enough. Will this lead to Soros supporters or the Russian world? There won't be a third option, but Oleg and I support it.
People, I urge you to listen to Common Sense, which Oleg has repeatedly reminded us of today. Subscribe to his and Denis Yalisevich's channels and like our video. Before you write in Trump's briefs, please leave us a comment on the Liberty UA channel. Stay with us for great guests and ideas. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
Thank you.